Hey, I'm Bobby Rio. This is Rob Judge. And if you've ever been hanging out with a woman, maybe out on a date or you're just meeting her, and you want to take her to that intimate, more touchy-feely level, but you don't know how, in this video, Rob and I are going to give you 5 ways to touch a woman that turns her on without coming across creepy. Hey guys, I'm Bobby Rio and this is Rob Judge.
Hello, hello.
And we've all been in that situation where you're having a good time with a woman and there's a level you're at, maybe it's a more friendly, platonic level, and you know it's the point of the night where you've got to shift gears and get to that more touchy-feely level, but you're stuck. You're like, how do I do it? Because you don't want to start grabbing her and coming across creepy. So we want to give you 5 ways, Rob's going to go through them, that you can begin introducing that more intimate touch into your conversation without, like we said, having her go, what is he doing? This is creepy. Why is he touching me? In a more way that it not only is more under the radar, but also gets her turned on, gets her feeling a little bit more attracted to you. So I'm gonna turn it over to Rob and let him kind of walk you through each of the 5 ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, just dovetailing on what you were just saying, I mean, that's the whole purpose, right? This is a form of communication, just like flirting, verbal communication turns her on. The way you touch her is another form of communication. Yeah. And the thing that I think is funny is that, like you said, there's a stigma that you're going to be termed creepy by grabbing a woman. And again, we obviously don't advocate grabbing women, but what guys don't consider, and a bigger risk, is it's not so much that grabbing a woman is going to be creepy, but it's more that your hand is going to linger or that touch is going to linger for a little bit too long. So before we even get into any, the 5 different touches that we're going to explain in this video, I first just want to, just emphasize that a lot of this early on, when you first meet a woman, to preserve her comfort level, you want to sort of do what I call like the touch and go, where it's like, you touch her for a second or two, get her, comfortable enough where, but like, you don't want to keep your touch lingering. You don't want to be, Mr. Hover Hands, just keeping his hand on a woman's back, because that's, I think, is exponentially more creepy than, anything else you could do. So, and with that in mind, that's how we sort of built these 5 different touches. That the first 3 are going to be examples of that touch and go. Very quick, very, you touch her, you touch her in a couple different places, but then you pull your hand back. You leave her wanting more.
And what you'll notice is when you're really vibing with a woman, a lot of times this happens naturally, right? So a lot of times a woman will actually be doing that to you, and in that case, just kind of mirror what she's doing. But sometimes you're out on a date, especially when you're sitting across from her at a restaurant, right? One of the reasons that we don't recommend like first dates at a restaurant is because it does make it a little bit tougher. But times where you're across from her, or times where the conversation is a little bit more serious and that natural touch and go that Rob is going to explain isn't happening, this is how you begin to introduce it. So.
And that's a great point, is that, if you can be aware of the logistics, because the first couple of these touches, it does help where if you're seated next to a woman. A really quick way to do that, if you're on a date, you find yourself, across from a woman, where you're face to face, you could just excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, and when you come back, you can slide in next to her. You can say, oh, I need to show you something. I used to keep foreign currency in my wallet. Or just a stupid thing to pull out. Oh, hey, I got to show you the Polish zloty. Look at this guy's mustache. And I'd be like, hey, and that's how I'd sort of bridge that gap. So there's very easy ways to do that. Because, initially the touch and go works, these 3 touches that are make up touch and go, they work especially well when, it's a situation like this, where you and a woman are, sort of standing next to each other. Maybe it's at the bar. You can say, hey, let's grab a drink.
It's one of the reasons one of the reasons that logistically, if you are meeting a woman for a date, we love happy hour type of places, because you are at a stool like this, which does make it easier. But as Rob said, having something interesting on your phone or carrying something interesting with you that you can say, hey, I got to show you something, and it allows you to scoot over next to her in the booth is really, really a key move. So
exactly, and every guy who's good with women, I think, has his own little method of doing that. So, and I challenge all you guys to come up with your own way, your own creative way to do that. But once you have that way, once you're kind of seated like this, right? The first technique, what's called the lasso. Now the lasso, again, we gave them kind of hokey names just so you help you remember them. But the lasso is when you actually kind of put your arm over like this, and you pull the woman into you. So I remember back in the day, you also used to be referred to as the claw, because it's like kind of like, you have this, and the idea is that like, you're talking to a woman, and you use this to really emphasize a point. She says something you agree with. She likes some band that you also like, or some movie you like, oh, you like that? I like that too. And then boom, you pull her into you just for a second, and then you kind of, I wouldn't say you push her away like aggressively, but you let go. You pull your hand back, almost like a lasso, boom. You pull her in, and then you just kind of let go, and that leaves her wanting more. That gives her that sort of spike of emotion, but you're gone before she can even sort of process it, before she can even start to think, ooh, this is kind of creepy. She's not gonna have that thought. She's like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, and Rob brought up a good word, is push and pull, right? In flirting in general, flirting creates tension, and you think of tension as like pulling her towards you, right? If you say to her, that's a really sexy dress, that's pulling her towards you, that's creating tension. Pushing her away is saying, get away from me, right? Like, get away from me, and it's breaking the tension. So when you always think, okay, if I'm touching her, I'm creating tension, but now I kind of have to pull it away so that she doesn't get uncomfortable.
That push-pull is a great dynamic to think of all these touch and go.
Touching, everything, yeah.
Exactly.
Compliments, yeah.
Compliments is another one. And that's the thing, is that a lot of your touching is going to mirror sort of what you do verbally. The same way that you're going to, if you just compliment the woman, say, hey, you're beautiful. It's almost like, again, you're lassoing her, but then you're holding her there. Yeah. It's super creepy, super weird. And you obviously you don't want to be doing that. So that's why just having sort of a phrase,
Yeah, it's like, hey, and you kind of do it, and then you say, and then you go back to your conversation. So,
exactly.
What's the next one?
So the next one is what we call the scoop. Now the scoop is just sort of the lasso, but around her waist. Now this is a little bit more intimate than, the scoop is more intimate than the lasso. The lasso is more of like almost sort of a little bit of dominance, whereas the scoop, it's a more intimate thing. You've probably done this before. If you've been in a long-term relationship, this is how you'd hold your girlfriend. If you and your girlfriend were at the bar ordering drinks, you'd probably put your hand around her waist, hold her there. And again, you can hold this a little bit longer than the lasso, but just like we were saying, you don't want to hold it too long. So maybe, you say, oh, hey, one thing I used to love to do is I'd pretend like the venue was too loud and I couldn't hear exactly what a woman was. I was like, oh, wait, say that again. And I pull her in with the scoop, and she would repeat herself, like, oh, okay, yeah, and then and then I would let go. So you could hold this, and if you look at what we're doing here, we're building up these touches so that the first one is very, very quick. You put your hand on her, you let go. The next one is you hold it a little bit longer, but then you let go, because now she's getting more and more comfortable with you touching her. But again, you're out of there before she ever feels uncomfortable, or she feels like creeped out, or that you're being too aggressive.
Everything that Rob and I teach in the Scrambler and in various stuff, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That 1 step back makes her want it more. I remember with a woman that I was with, we, after we started dating a little bit more seriously, we talked about our initial first dates. We've all probably done that, where you're like, and she goes, I remember on the date you would like touch me, and you would like, your hand would graze against my butt, but then you would go back to normal. And I would be like, oh, is he gonna do it again? And that's essentially what starts happening, is when you get these touches, they actually, if the vibe is good, right? We're not talking about going up to your coworker and doing this. You're out on a date, the vibe is good, you give her a little bit, you take it away, and now there's like a hole that she wants you to fill, and she anticipates it. She's waiting for the next time you do it.
And that's an excellent point, and something I should have mentioned earlier, is that a lot of these touches, the best time to touch a woman is at a high point. It's like when she's laughing, you're in agreement, she does something that you enjoy, or you've just done something that she enjoys. Those high points, if you could see those opportunities, those are the best times to touch a woman. And again, it's like I said, and it was kind of implicit when I was explaining the lasso and the scoop. It's like, okay, like, oh, you like that too? Boom. And you throw the lasso. Oh, hey, yeah, we need to get a drink. What kind of drink do you like? Boom. And you scoop her. The next type of touch, and that next type of touch and go, it's a little bit different than the scoop and the lasso, in the sense that this actually creates a spike. This actually, regardless of what's going on in the interaction, you can do this next sort of touch that's actually gonna just sort of give her this swell of good emotions, and that's what I call the spin. Bobby see me do this at nightclub. Yeah, I mean, he was like, when we're talking about this, you got to get the spin in there. Because this was like an old school move that I used to do, all the time. And I used to go out, to bars and nightclubs and, cold approach women, girls I had never met before. And I would do this very quickly because this immediately establishes a fun, playful vibe. Now, what it is, it's so simple. It's like you simply hold your hand up like this. And just let me preface that. You should be standing, and it's especially well if you're moving through the venue with her. Say you and her are moving to a quieter place, or you say, hey, let's grab a drink or whatever, and she's kind of following you. You just kind of turn around to her and you hold your hand up. And sometimes I would even prompt women. I'd say, oh, let me see your dance moves, or let me see how good of a ballerina are you. And I'd put my hand out like this, and I can't think of a time a woman has ever not taken my hand. It's almost like a little girl fantasy. Girls, they every girl probably took, dance lessons when she was little, so you know exactly what to do when you hold your hand up and say, hey, let me see your ballerina moves, right? So hold your hand up, she takes it, and then you spin her. And it's such a goofy kind of thing, but every time I've done that, when that girl, from here to when she turns around in that spin, she's in a better mood. It just immediately creates a good vibe.
I remember the first time I saw Rob do this, and he did, and they came back, and I'm like, oh yeah, and I was like, yeah, but I don't want to do that because I'm a horrible dancer, and he's like, I'm a horrible dancer. That's why I do it, because now I kind of get that out, and like she's like, I give her that little dancing, and then I don't have to dance with her. I kind of get that intimacy of dancing without actually going on the dance floor. And it's a great move. And we actually, back when we used to do in-person coaching, I remember we had taken a bunch of students out years ago. They saw you do it a few times, and later that night, I remember looking around and
it was like the Met Ballet. All of a sudden, all these spins, and that's such a great point too. This is not an invitation to start dancing with her. Again, you do this. In fact, the fact that you don't dance with her, I think, is actually what spikes her emotion. I think if you then sort of grinding with her or doing stuff that as if you were using this to transition to dance with her, I think it would actually be cliche and it would be creepy. The idea is, and the other thing too is that there doesn't even have to be music playing for this to work. You don't have to, even if you're, as long as you're in a decently high energy environment, she's gonna spin. I promise you. Again, if it doesn't work, leave a comment below. But I'm sure that you're gonna surprise yourself, even if you're like, I don't know if that would work. Believe me. Once a girl sees you do this, it's almost like this unconscious thing in her head that she takes your hand and you're essentially leading her through that little pirouette.
And remember, you're pushing her because you're pulling her a little bit with that spin, but then you're letting it go, and now you gave her a little bit, because one of the things we didn't really mention, and maybe we will in a bit, is, and I know as Rob goes through this, is like the most intimate part of her body and your body together is when your hands touch, right? We all think it's like her butt or but there's nothing more intimate between a man and a woman early on than when your hands first have that touch, right? And if you let it stay too long, it can get weird. But if you spin her around, she's got your hand in her hand, and then it lets go, and then you go back to talking, you gave her that spike, right? That's what this is all about. So I know the next one or the next two might lead a little bit more into this. So let's get to the next one.
I was gonna say that is a perfect segue into the longer touches, because these all have to do with the hand. Because like Bobby said, the hand is like sort of the, it's almost like, they say like the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. The way to a woman's heart, or other areas of her body, a lot of time is through holding her hand. For whatever reason, we have a lot of nerve endings here. It just, something's programmed into us that when we're holding someone's hand, we feel attraction for them, whether it's a release of oxytocin or whatever it is. I don't care what the science is. All I know is I've done this many times and it works. So the sooner you can hold a girl's hand, the more attraction she's gonna feel for you. Yeah. And the thing that's difficult though is that you're obviously not gonna walk up to a girl you just met on a date, or even a girl you met at a party or whatever. You're not just gonna walk up to her and hold her hand. That's not gonna be comfortable for her. So you have to find some of these sort of roundabout ways to get her to hold your hand where she is comfortable. Yeah. One of the first ways to do that is what I call the lock. Now this is where your fingers and her fingers lock together. Now one way to do this, again, we give this example a lot, is like the high five. Oh, you like that movie? I like that movie too. Give me a high five. She high fives you, and you don't just give her a high five. You actually curl your fingers into her fingers, and And again, it's almost like one of these reflexive things. She'll do it too. And now your fingers are curled together. You lock. You kind of maybe like a little bit like, one of those, oh yeah, you like that. And then you pull away. You pull your hand away again, because you want to do this slowly. You want to build this up, in sort of more of a gradual sort of thermostat way.
And what he just gave, that lock and linger to an extent, is also one of the most patented attraction tests that you can use. Because if you do this and the vibe is good, she will let her hand linger there, and you'll kind of know, okay, we've gone over that hump, we're in that intimate level. But if you do that and she immediately pulls away, then you kind of go, okay, we're not there yet. I've got to create some more attraction. We're not at that point. You're not ready to lean in and kiss her yet, but the minute she's letting you linger there, you're at that point where you're like, okay, I'm comfortable now going for the kiss tonight because she's there. That's
a great point. It's a great temperature check to see where she's at, where her, how, like I said, it's so telling. It's one of those things that I can't think of a time where a woman didn't curl her fingers where she wasn't attracted to me, and also I can't think of a time when I went to high five a woman and she just gave me that flat high five, and that's when I'm like, okay, like I got to do more to attract her. Maybe I have to spin her or whatever. But you have to look at that like, okay, like obviously this woman is not comfortable enough with me at this point, or not attracted to me enough, where like if I try to kiss her now, it's not gonna go well. And just as a quick bonus tip for guys who maybe don't want to high five a woman, or you don't see that opportunity, another just easy opportunity to make to lock your fingers with a woman is challenge her to a thumb wrestling war. It's sort of like a cheesy old school thing to do, but again, it's like you have a saying, bring her back to the playground.
Anything that worked on the playground in the 5th grade works in the dating scene. It's a weird thing that is counterintuitive, but if it worked with your crush on the playground, it works now.
And what's so great about that is that it's just one of those challenges you throw out there. Hey, let's do a thumb wrestle, or you can do it. Another one sort of variation on that is, I'm a palm reader. Let me read your palm, and you give her like a goofy palm. Obviously you're not Madame Cleo all of a sudden. Yeah. You're not going to try to really read her palm. But again, she's like if you say, that's interesting. Let me see your palm. That's interesting lifeline. She's going to put her hand out. You put your hand there, and essentially what these techniques are doing is that you're sort of using a loophole to lock your fingers into her and to allowing her, or allowing you to hold her hand for a more prolonged period of time without coming off creepy. If you just walk up to a woman, try to hold her hand, after meeting her for maybe 20 or 30 minutes, she probably wouldn't feel comfortable. But if you say, hey, like interesting lifeline, let me read your palm, she's going to do that, and she'll feel comfortable.
And aside on the palm reading, I years ago I was at a little party with some social circle type party. There's this girl Grace who, she was not really my type. She was okay looking. I wasn't really that into her, and she did that to me where she did the palm reading, and she was she's going through my hands, and she's doing this like running her hands down the lines on my hand and telling me some weird stuff, and I was actually I wound up hooking up with her that night. Just because it was so intimate. I was like, it just created this intimacy between us. Now, obviously, at that party I was at, there was some alcohol involved. You're not gonna just walk up again. We always preface when we talk about touching, this is all on high notes. It's all when the vibe is good. It's not like you're gonna go up to your coworker and go, let me read your palm, and start, rubbing her hand.
Yeah.
It's all, and just to bring back really fast before we move to the final point, is that Rob said this, and I want to stress it. All of these things are really easy if you're laughing, if you're kind of in that you go and you do it. It comes across very naturally. If you're sitting there and she's telling you this story about her boss, and you're like scooping, it's weird. But if she's telling you kind of a funny story, she's like, oh my God, I did this, and you're like, oh my God, and then you kind of scoop her for a second.
Yeah,
it's very natural. She won't even register it, right? So.
Excellent point. Again, another way to look at this is look at it like touching under pretext. You have a pretext to touch her. You're not just, unwarranted, you're just throwing your hand out and grabbing her. You have a pretext to do it, which that is going to make it more palatable for her. That's going to make it more comfortable for her, more attractive, just more sexually arousing. Everything's going to be better on her end. Everything's going to be better on your end. So it's win-win.
You can also look at it, a way to look at it is rewarding her. Okay. So if you're like, how do I do this, right? Just pay attention when she's doing something, if she says something that actually is something you admire, right? Maybe she's like, I love to cook. I'll cook, I cook all my boyfriends, whatever. You can lean in that, I love you. That's so awesome, right? And then you let go. It's like anytime you're rewarding her, she says something funny, she does something cool. You like the Yankees, boom, high five. I love the Yankees. Like anytime that you're rewarding her, touch and go.
Yes, okay. That's just a really good way to sort of conceptualize this. And now the final fifth touch in our 5 attractive touches is an old school one that actually we picked up from our friend Chris, which is called the turn. Now what the turn is that, whenever we meet someone, obviously, like, in Western culture, we put our hand out for a handshake. That's like sort of the business way to greet someone is you shake their hand. And, if you put your hand out to any woman you just met, whatever, she's gonna put her hand out. It's just like a reflective act, or like a reflex essentially. But the thing that takes it to the next level, right? And this is where this you could add something to this where she's going to backward rationalize that she's attracted to you, is that you actually start to turn her hand over. And while you're doing this, you continue to talk to her. So if you go, I remember, again, when I used to do this when I meet women at bars or nightclubs, and I would approach them, very early on, I'd say, hey, what's up, I'm Rob. I'd put my hand out. She would take my hand. And I wouldn't just shake her hand like I was like a business associate and let it go. I would take her hand and be like, yeah, so, I'm out tonight, I was walking around, I noticed you, blah, blah. And again, it wouldn't even matter what I was saying, but as I'm talking, I'm turning her hand over. And now, one of the reasons I think this works so well is because this is an incredibly stylized a gesture. If you think about a troubadour, you see him,
She's
right?
waiting for you to kiss her hand.
Almost. And that's the thing. And that's what makes this so effective is that as you turn it over, but then you pull it away. Again, you leave her wanting more. You set up that expectation, and then you just swerve her on a little bit that you keep her guessing. Oh, okay, like she's enjoying it, and then boom, and then you slide it away, and then, you just keep talking. And the reason that, again, I just want to emphasize this, the reason that you want to keep talking is that as you're talking, you're keeping her logical mind off of the fact, again, if you just go, hey, I'm Rob, and then she gives your hand, and then you just kind of look at her creepily and like turn her hand over, that's not going to work. But if you're able to just keep talking, you just make no big deal, and you just like, oh, blah, 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 turn her hand over, and then you slide it away. It's almost like this unconscious thing. You'll just notice that she's so much more receptive to what you're saying. She's so much more into the conversation, and it's just like this little hack that, again, our friend Chris 60 came up with it, and I remember the first time I tried it, I was like, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Like, okay, you turn her hand over and you pull it, like, all right. But I was like, all right, I'll go out and give it a try. And I remember doing it and seeing it work the first time, I was hooked. And I used that ever since, and it's been an incredibly effective sort of just tool in my, methods of communicating with women, especially, in terms of communicating physically, that has worked incredibly well for me over the years.
Yeah, a lot of this is based on tension and sexual tension between a man and woman and sort of tapping into it, but tapping into it in a very innocent, under the radar way, right? You're tapping it anytime it's like there's an electricity, a man and a woman. We've all been there where you touch a woman's hand, no matter who she is, the minute there's that physical contact, it's like a spark occurs. And if you do it, like Rob said, and you're talking to her, she's feeling that spark, but you're letting it sort of be under the surface, right? You're not bringing attention to it. You're not addressing it. It's there, and it stays there for as long as she's talking to you. And everything that Rob and I addressed here is all about that vibe, right? We've all been in the situation. You automatically know if you're looking back on your dates, was it a good date or a bad date? And it's really about the vibe. It's not how much you had in common with her. It's like, was there that funny, flirty, touchy, feely vibe where you're like back and forth, and if that vibe is there, you're almost always gonna get a second date. It's gonna be so easy to kiss her at the end of the night. If that's not there, you guys could be sitting back and forth, and you can be talking about how you both traveled through Europe and you both studied English literature and like, you have all these things in common and you both actually enjoyed the conversation, but without that touchy, feely, flirty vibe, you're not gonna kiss her. And then when she's home later on a logical level, she's gonna go, oh yeah, like he's a cool guy. But on an emotional level, which we both know, emotion is what makes a woman's decision. She's not gonna have that strong desire to see you again. And if this is something that you struggle with, I highly recommend Rob and I put together something with a lot of these techniques. I'm gonna put a link to it below, and every technique that we're gonna teach you below is designed around this idea of creating that funny, flirty, touchy, feely vibe that allows you to escalate things forward in a very natural way. Because a lot of guys, you know, you've probably been there, I've probably been there, where you get to the end of the date and you're like, shit, I gotta like create, and you're like, how do I let her know? And then you try to blurt out some comment, you're really pretty.
Yeah.
And she's like so not ready for it because that vibe wasn't there.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, thank you. And it's just sort of this awkwardness. But when you start the very beginning of the date with all these like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, by the time the date ends, she's already, like, she's gonna mirror you. This is one thing that we didn't really address. When you start touching her, she's gonna start doing back to you, and everything comes naturally. So if this isn't natural for you, we've got a whole bunch of techniques that you can go through and start using. And these are fun techniques. They're innocent, they're under the radar, but they will create that vibe with her that creates that intimacy and that turns her on. So click that link below. Now, if you like this video, leave us a comment, tell us what you think, hit like, subscribe to the channel. And also, if there's something you don't understand or if there's something you want us to cover in our next video, leave a comment below and we will make sure we address it in future video.